Thank you. My name is Mark Ludwig. I do want to thank the members of the committee for taking the time to hear this issue, an extremely important one. Without going into all the details, out of respect for my son and his right to love his mom, shortly after my son was born, I went 204 days without seeing my son. I went 204 days without seeing my son. At the end of that time, I was relegated to the equivalent of an every other weekend visitor. Shortly after that, I was diagnosed with a pretty large growth in my brain. We didn't know what my future was going to be like. And it dawned on me that at that point, if something were to happen to me, my son's mom would automatically get sole custody. But it also dawned on me, if the situation had been reversed, I would have automatically gotten sole custody of the very son that I was already only getting every other weekend. Why would it take the death of a parent to convert from an every other weekend visitor to having full custody of a child? If that's the case, shouldn't both parents have 50-50? As a result of my story being televised on a news station in St. Louis, my story went viral. I think it's been 30 million views or something like that. And I started doing a lot of Facebook Lives. And my reach now is around 3 to 4 million in an average month. This past year I did a tour of 38 cities in 24 states. And this isn't about me at all. This is about a fact that obviously this issue resonates. If we're attracting 3 to 4 million people every single month that are paying attention to this, and as you look behind me at all the people that are affected, this is resonating, and it's the only issue in 30 years that I've been around the political arena that crosses gender lines, crosses racial lines, crosses political lines, crosses socioeconomic lines. It affects everybody.
Or like a death sentence almost for some of these cases, probably some of them that have been dealing with falsified allegations through the divorce, the finances, the real estate, maybe through affairs, communications fraud, all of these not being stopped. And then we're acting surprised as professionals in the industry that, oh, now they're manipulating the kids. And now we've got allegations of abuse, but in court world, those allegations really can win. And so how would you recommend people stand up against falsified allegations, against laws that support them? How could parents and professionals support your movement?
So when we talk to legislators, they're not really aware. They don't see those points because they see the protective pieces that can be helpful. And something like psychological abuse in California, for example, 9% of the children there are psychologically abused. 7% are physically abused and 5% are sexually abused. But when you see a law that's preventing physical and sexual abuse, even though just one example is California, that state has more children that are psychologically abused, it is totally left out of the law. I think that there's just not an awareness. There seems to be a misconception that it's too hard to prove and you can't figure it out and no one knows. So it's just sort of ignored.
I want to ask you now about this topic that you are such an expert on with the civil versus the criminal law. So I'm really excited about, asking what your feedback is about crimes that are committed in family law cases and parents not being informed, even sometimes professionals, law enforcement, CPS or DCFS workers, school officials are not being informed about the crime, custodial interference, slander, abduction, these laws that are in place. What would you recommend on sharing resources for parents to educate that those are crimes that are reportable, preventable, and can have consequences, and that it's, in my opinion, there's this movement to kind of just say, oh, go to family court. We'll hear that from law enforcement, school, even when it's a case that could have a potential abduction. So we'll keep the kid here. We'll keep everything going the way it is. And then the victim sometimes can go years and never get justice. So I want to ask your expertise on the criminal law system versus civil law in family law cases where crimes are being committed and parents and professionals aren't aware of some of the resources that you're teaching about.
Mm-hmm. So I'm definitely not a lawyer. I'll put that out there, and I'm not giving legal advice, but I do know the information that has been out there for custodial interference. This is all public knowledge. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children had put out a definition about custodial interference in 2011. And so it says family abduction occurs when, in violation of a court order, a decree, or other legitimate custodial rights, a member of the child's family or someone acting on behalf of a family member takes or fails to return a child. This is also referred to as parental kidnapping and custodial.
Continuing our coverage on growing calls for family court reform tonight and sharing an alarming statistic that 20 children have been killed by a parent in the past 5 years during custody disputes in New York State. News 12's Blaise Gomez is speaking to advocates and lawmakers who say the system is failing the families it was designed to protect.
Kira's murder was 100% preventable. She should never have been with him that day.
Jacqueline Franchetti's 28-month-old daughter, Kira, was on a New York State family court-approved visit in Virginia with her father when he shot her twice in the back and set fire to his home in a murder-suicide.
I fought for her, but our court system is set up to protect the abuser and not the child, and that must end.
Franchetti says her domestic violence and safety concerns for the toddler were ignored by the judge, Child Protective Services, forensic evaluators, and her daughter's legal advocate in Nassau County. The 2016 tragedy is one of many custodial cases nationwide, grabbing headlines and shining a spotlight on problems and loopholes in custodial courts. Advocates and lawmakers say the system is outdated and hurting many of the families it was designed to protect.
There needs to be significant wholesale reform to the family court system.
Senator James Skoufis co-sponsors 2 reform bills, including Kira's Law, named after Franchetti's daughter.
Kira's Law, very simply, requires training of judges, of court officials, so that they are able to identify red flags when there is violence involved and make an informed decision that can keep that child safe.
There are 5 family court reform bills pending in New York State that would address child safety and close legal loopholes concerning due process concerns and the use of forensic evaluations in custody cases.
What happened to Kira can happen to a child you know and love, unless changes are made.
Blaise Gomez, News 12.
At least 1 in 7 children have experienced child abuse or neglect in the past year in the United States. In 2021, a reported 452,313 perpetrators abused or neglected a child, with falsified allegations almost unilaterally giving the accuser immediate and complete control of every aspect of the child. Therapists have heard of these cases where the judges are so sick of it that they are taking it out in an extreme way on a case that shows false allegations and flipping the child's custody to punish the parent. Still, there is no mental health resolution. There is no therapy to address why a parent would do that and who taught them to do that, and that the child is the one who pays the ultimate price. In the future, the mother or father will be so mad and so traumatized that they lost contact with their son or daughter that they will try to get back at one another.